I hadn't even crossed the room before I heard it. A tight little laugh, sharp, brittle, followed by a whisper that wasn't meant to be subtle. "Vintage is brave," someone said. Another giggled. They laughed at my dress. That was their first mistake. They didn't need to say it aloud. I felt it in the way eyes skimmed over me and then circled back, surprised I hadn't disappeared. The dress wasn't flashy. It wasn't designer. It was a soft blue vintage silk tea-length something my mother had worn to her engagement dinner in 1964. It fit me like memory, graceful, intentional, but here it looked like I had shown up to a fashion show in a library card. I paused just long enough to let the moment fold around me. One of the bridesmaids tilted her glass toward another. "Do you think she knows," she murmured, "that she's giving thrift store gala?" Her table laughed, the kind of synchronized laughter that doesn't reach the eyes, only signals rank. I didn't flinch. I stayed still, not because I was uncertain, but because I had nothing left to prove. I didn't come to blend in. I didn't come for the champagne, or the spectacle, or even the groom. I came because someone else would be there. Someone who never forgot. If you've ever walked into a room already knowing you were the punchline, hit subscribe. This story may remind you that silence isn't weakness. It's armor you polish without applause. The wedding was beautiful in the way high-budget weddings often are, flawless in form, but hollow in feeling. Giant eucalyptus sprays framed every aisle. Gold-rimmed glassware sparkled under chandeliers, and white-gloved servers floated like ghosts. But beneath all of it, nothing warm. Everything smelled like money, not like love. I wasn't family, not technically. My connection to the groom was a single decision I had made 15 years ago. One form, one override, one risk. It had saved his uncle's life, and no one here knew. I was seated by the kitchen doors, close enough to feel the heat, when the trays swung open far enough to know I was positioned for invisibility. One woman at my table stared at me for a beat too long before asking her friend, "Do you think she's a cousin, or like someone's old nanny?" Her friend laughed. "She looks like she wandered in off the sidewalk." I didn't reply. I had once signed contracts that kept both of their family businesses afloat, but clearly they'd forgotten, or chosen to. And if you've ever sat quietly in a room full of people who wouldn't survive a single week of what you've endured, subscribe. Not all strength demands applause. The ceremony began. The bride, stunning in a gown that shimmered like pearl, floated down the aisle as if carried on compliments. Phones rose, voices gasped. She was perfect. The groom beamed. Every seat leaned toward her. But my eyes didn't follow. They stopped on the man entering quietly through the side door. He moved with quiet authority, and a silver cane pressing the tip against the floor in a soft, syncopated rhythm. His suit was sharp, his hair entirely white. He didn't look around. He knew exactly where to go, straight to the groom's family table. "They say he's the military uncle," someone whispered behind me. "Decorated, Navy, some kind of legend." I didn't join the guessing. I had seen that man once at Walter Reed, shaking from blood loss, mid-transport, barely conscious. I had been the one who cleared his medevac when no one else would sign. I still remembered his hand gripping mine as he whispered, "I won't forget this." I never expected to see him again. But here he was, Uncle Patrick, sitting 20 feet away, and when his eyes met mine, his face froze mid-gesture. A pause, a pull between the brows, a nod, small, deliberate. I didn't wave, I didn't smile. My expression stayed still, not cold, just enough. He nodded back. After the ceremony, guests spilled into the reception hall. My table hadn't moved, still beside the restrooms behind a floral arrangement, tall enough to block the dance floor. Someone clinked a glass and called out to the brave souls who came alone. Another muttered, "Extra tables are for extras." I stayed still, because while they were laughing, I was watching, and I saw him again. Uncle Patrick. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't even eating. He was staring, not out of confusion, but memory. Then the lights shifted. The music lowered. The best man gave a toast. The maid of honor wept. The bride's father launched into a rambling story about a family vacation that left half the guests checking their phones. And then, the groom stood. "Before dinner is served," he said, "I want to invite someone to say a few words." He came all the way from DC, Uncle Patrick. A rustle of attention, a momentary hush. Patrick rose slowly, gripping his cane. He didn't smile. He scanned the room with the same stillness I remembered from that night in the command room. "I don't give many speeches anymore," he said, "but for my nephew, I made an exception. Laughter, Light. He let it pass. Then there's someone here today I didn't expect to see. Someone I owe more than I could ever repay. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't be standing. He didn't say my name, he didn't need to. But every gaze in the room shifted like a tide, and for the first time all night they looked. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. His words, measured, reverent, cut through the air like a thread pulled taut. The room shifted. That easy cocktail hour comfort drained out like wine from a cracked glass. Chairs adjusted, heads tilted. Laughter stalled in the throat. People who hadn't looked in my direction all evening were now scanning the crowd with quiet urgency. And then he moved, not quickly, not with drama, just a slow, deliberate step forward. His cane tapped softly against the polished floor, a rhythm of command disguised in gentleness. He walked diagonally across the room through clusters of linen-covered tables and murmuring confusion. Each step was its own declaration, I know exactly where I'm going. I didn't rise. I didn't adjust my dress or glance around to see who noticed. I sat as if I had been waiting for this moment without ever expecting it to come. He stopped 2 feet in front of me. For a breath, no words, just the echo of silence pulling tight around us. Then slowly, without flourish, he bowed. Not a nod, not a tip of the head. A real bow. One formed in the spine, not the shoulders. The kind given in countries that still believe in honor and to people who never ask for it. When he straightened, he looked me in the eye. Thank you, ma'am, he said, for your work and for your silence. Every table seemed to inhale at once. A fork dropped in the distance. Someone whispered, "Who is she?" but no one answered. Because in that moment, they all knew whatever story they had made up about me wasn't enough to explain what was happening. I placed my glass gently on the table. "You're welcome, sir," I said. My voice didn't shake. I spoke the way you speak when there's nothing left to prove and nothing left to hide. He gave a final nod and turned to walk back toward the front. This time the silence deepened. The kind of silence that happens when something sacred just passed by, and no one knows how to clap for it. The bride's mother shifted in her seat. The bridesmaids stared down at their napkins. Someone at the next table exhaled sharply, as though realizing they'd forgotten how to breathe. When he reached the microphone again, Uncle Patrick didn't clear his throat or check his notes. He just looked out across the room and said, "What we build in life doesn't always show up in headlines. Sometimes the people who save us sit quietly in the back." He raised his glass. "So tonight, don't toast me. Toast them. The ones whose names aren't on the program but without whom none of this would be happening." Glasses lifted. And this time, so did mine. But I noticed something. The bride hesitated. She held her glass by the stem, fingers poised. But she didn't raise it until the groom gave her a gentle nudge under the table. Then she smiled, tight and brittle, and lifted her glass like it weighed more than it should. No one laughed toward my table after that. The bridesmaid who had mocked my thrift store dress passed by twice, eyes darting toward me like she was checking for evidence. Another woman, the one who had asked if I was someone's nanny, offered me a smile, small, sheepish. It wasn't confrontation. It was calibration. They were rearranging the narrative in real time, unsure how to reconcile what they now knew with who they thought I was. I didn't help them. I stayed at my table beside the restrooms behind the orchids. I ate my salad in silence. The candles flickered gently. The music returned softer now, unsure of its place. And I didn't move because I had already arrived. Later during the couple's first dance, a waiter approached, young, kind eyes. He refilled my water, then leaned slightly and whispered, "Ma'am, I don't know what that was about, but it was the classiest thing I've ever seen at a wedding." I looked up and met his gaze. "Thank you," I said simply. Then I placed my napkin beside my plate, stood, and walked out before the cake was served. The night air greeted me like a friend I hadn't seen in a long time, cool, uncomplicated. The vineyard stretched out beneath a navy blue sky freckled with early stars. My heels pressed softly into the gravel as I walked to my car. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel smug. I felt something else entirely, peace shaped like closure. A stillness I hadn't known I needed until a man with a cane gave it back to me in the shape of a bow. I had made it halfway across the gravel lot when I heard it not footsteps chasing, but the hesitant rhythm of someone deciding whether to follow, heels clicking with too much care. I didn't turn around, not right away. I let her make the choice. The sound didn't stop, so I did. When I turned, she stood framed by the spill of light from the ballroom doors. Her gown shimmered perfect and brittle like it had been starched into elegance. But her hands trembled slightly as they gripped her train to keep it from touching the dust. "Excuse me," she called, not loudly. The kind of voice you use when you're not sure if you'll be answered. "Claire, is that right?" I turned fully posture steady, but inside something small tightened a flicker of old instinct. The one that braces before a veiled dismissal. "Yes," I said. "Claire Easton." She took a few careful steps forward. "I'm sorry," she began, smiling a smile that looked too rehearsed to survive the wind. "I just realized I never got a chance to greet you properly. I didn't know you were invited." There it was, the sentence dressed as courtesy stitched with control. I had heard it 100 ways in my life, from boardrooms, from polished tongues, from women who had learned how to police power with pleasantries. I nodded once. I was invited. My name was on the envelope, in handwriting. Her smile wavered just slightly, the corners dipping before she caught them again. "Right, of course. It's just, Uncle Patrick doesn't usually bring people. I mean, he keeps things tight." She was fishing, looking for context, for something to explain what had just occurred without rewriting her worldview. "I hadn't heard your name before," she added quickly. "That's all." I didn't answer. I let the pause stretch, not out of spite, but to let her hear the echo of her own discomfort. Eventually, she pushed forward. "Did you and Uncle Patrick work together in the past?" "We met a long time ago," I said. "He was in a difficult situation overseas. I helped make sure he got home." Her eyebrows lifted. "Oh, were you?" "Military / civilian," I replied. "Defense logistics, clearance operations." She blinked. I watched her mind click through a Rolodex of unfamiliar titles. This wasn't the story she had been given, and now her assumptions, polished and convenient, were cracking in real time. "Wow," she said finally. "That's incredible. What he said tonight. It was really moving. Thank you for coming." She wanted to take the reins again, recast herself as gracious host. But I didn't let her shape the ending of something she never saw begin. "It was a beautiful wedding," I said, my tone gentler than expected. She seemed surprised. "Thank you, and congratulations." I turned back toward my car. She didn't follow. Behind me, the ballroom glowed with champagne-colored light. But something inside had changed. I could see it even from the gravel. The edges of conversation had softened like a tide pulling back after a misstep. I stood by my car for a moment longer. I could have left. I should have. But something in me refused to exit like I had been chased. So I walked back in. Through the side entrance. No announcement, no fuss. But this time people noticed. The groom's father looked up mid-sip and nodded, tentative, unsure. The woman who had called me a nanny earlier averted her eyes. The bridesmaid who joked about vintage being brave looked directly at me, then looked away. Quickly, it wasn't guilt, not yet, but it was awareness, the beginning of seeing. I returned to my table. No one stopped me. And then the groom came over. He approached with a kind of reverence one not taught but felt. "Miss Easton," he said, offering his hand. "I'm really glad you came." I shook it, firm. "Grounded, congratulations. It's a lovely evening." He hesitated. "Uncle Patrick doesn't say things lightly. Whatever you two share, I'm honored that you're here." I paused, then said quietly, "He helped someone I care about, years ago. I made sure he got the support he needed when others wouldn't." The groom's face changed, not wide-eyed, not dramatic, but sincere. "Then I owe you too. He's family. If you hadn't stepped in, I might have been missing a chair tonight. No one owes me anything," I said. "I did my job. Quietly." He smiled. The ones who stay quiet usually do the most. Then he turned and walked to the center of the floor, where his wife waited, already posed for the first dance. As they swayed, she glanced over his shoulder once. Her eyes met mine, and this time she didn't smile. She looked away, quickly. I stayed a few minutes longer, finished my drink, folded my napkin just so. No one whispered this time. No one dared. And when I walked out again, I walked like someone who had never needed to be seen to matter. I left the wedding in silence. No farewell glances, no backward looks. Just the sound of gravel under my heels, and the cool hush of night settling over the vineyard hills. I drove the first 10 miles without music, letting the rhythm of the road untangle the tension still folded beneath my ribs. I wasn't sad, not angry either. It felt like closing a file drawer you had forgotten you'd left open for years. There was no need for closure. The bow had been enough. By the time I reached my small townhouse on the edge of town, the sky had already begun to fade from blue to charcoal. I changed into soft clothes, unpinned my hair, and poured a glass of water before turning off the porch light. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. And when I woke the next morning, I did not expect anything else to follow me home from that wedding. But something did. Around 10 a.m. A plain envelope slid through my front door mail slot. No stamp, no postmark. Just my name handwritten in block letters across the front. Claire Easton. There was no return address, no seal, just thick cream paper folded once inside. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Claire, I meant every word. I waited a long time to thank you properly, and I didn't want it to be done in a hallway or over email. I wanted it to be seen. I know you never asked for recognition. That's exactly why it mattered. What I couldn't say out loud was that your signature saved not only my life, but the lives of 5 others. We were stuck without clearance, and everyone said no until you found a way to say yes. I know it cost you something politically. I remember. It is not lost on me that you stood in that room quietly while people whispered as if you hadn't once carried the weight of others on your back. But I saw you, just like you once saw me. That bow was not symbolic. It was owed. Patrick. I reread the note 3 times, each line a quiet exhale. Then I folded it back into its envelope and tucked it into the inside pocket of my blazer, the same one I'd worn to the wedding. I didn't frame it. I didn't post about it. I didn't call anyone to explain. It wasn't that kind of letter. Some acknowledgments are meant only for the person who lived through the moment. Later that week, I received another unexpected delivery, a slim parcel wrapped in soft navy cloth sealed with a red wax emblem. No card this time. Inside, I found a challenge coin, heavy, gold-rimmed, engraved with the emblem of the U.S. Navy's highest civilian commendation. Below it, 2 simple words, "Without her." I sat with it in my palm for several minutes, not because I needed validation, but because sometimes the weight of something small carries the force of something long delayed. I placed it inside a wooden box in my study, one I hadn't opened in years. It held other remnants, a thank you pin from a logistics summit, a folded flag from a diplomat's memorial. I helped coordinate a worn photograph of a woman I once worked beside who didn't make it home. I hadn't touched that box in a long time, but suddenly it felt right to open it again, not as a monument to the past, but as a quiet honoring of what still lives in me. A few days later, I received a short voicemail from the groom. He said, "Claire, I hope I'm not intruding. I just wanted to say thank you again for being there. My uncle hasn't stopped talking about you. He said that if it weren't for you, he never would have made it to our wedding. I can't wrap my head around that. Just thank you." He didn't ask for anything else. He didn't push for details. Just left his voice there on the line, sincere and brief. The bride never called. But she didn't need to. I wasn't angry with her. What happened between us wasn't personal, it was structural. A woman raised to lead with perception, not depth. To manage a room, not enter it quietly, and still be felt. She hadn't learned how to read people without titles yet. But maybe now she would begin to. The gossip, I'm sure, faded quickly. By the time they returned from their honeymoon, there would be new stories circulating: the caterer who dropped a tray, the uncle who left. After one toast, the mysterious guest no one knew. Let them wonder. The truth doesn't always belong to the crowd. I went back to work. A quiet week of emails, agency meetings, project reviews. My name stayed off the headlines. That was how I liked it. But something had shifted in me, not something loud or dramatic, just a settling, as if an old ledger had been balanced. I walked past a coffee shop the next weekend and saw one of the bridesmaids seated by the window. She didn't notice me at first. But then our eyes met. And for a moment, her expression shifted. Not shame, not guilt, but awareness. She smiled, this time more humbly, and gave a small wave. I nodded, continued walking. I did not stop. I did not need to. I had been invisible for years, not because I lacked value, but because I had learned to let others take the room while I did the work beneath it. That wedding had not changed who I was. It had only revealed what had always been there. Sometimes, all it takes is one person standing still, while others move one bow, one thank you, to tilt the entire room back into truth. The envelope arrived on a Thursday, pale gray, no return address. But the handwriting was different this time, tighter slanted, unfamiliar. It wasn't from Patrick. Inside a single page, ink that had smudged slightly along the edges as though the writer had hesitated. At the top, no greeting, just a line. You don't know me, but you saved my life. I sat down at the table slowly. Below the first line, the message continued. My name is David Kern. I served under Lieutenant Colonel Patrick Easton. I was one of the 5 with him when the explosion hit our convoy outside of Bagram. We were losing blood fast. They told us there was no chance for medevac clearance too late in the window. But then somehow it happened. They lifted us. We didn't know why. I didn't understand until his wedding last week. Until I saw him bow to a woman who wasn't listed on the program. Until he told us what you did. He said you weren't military, that you weren't obligated, that your name wasn't in the files, but your action is the reason 5 of us made it back. I was 24. My daughter had just been born. She's 9 now. She has my stubbornness and her mother's laugh. She wouldn't know either if that helicopter hadn't arrived in time. Thank you. I don't know how to repay that kind of debt. But if I could, I would stand in front of you the same way Patrick did. If you're ever willing to meet, I'd like to shake your hand. No questions, no press, just gratitude. David Kern, Charlottesville, VA. I read it again slowly, carefully, then folded the letter with deliberate hands. I didn't cry. But something quiet settled in my chest, like a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since that night 15 years ago. The decision I made that night hadn't been simple. Clearance rules were stacked high with red tape. There had been risks, career ones, legal ones. At the time, I hadn't known the names of the men. I just knew the timeline, the coordinates, and the fact that their commanding officer wasn't ready to leave them behind. I didn't save them because I expected a bow. I did it because I couldn't bear the idea of being the final no in a stack of denials. That letter was the first time I realized the ripple effect had made it all the way into a little girl's laugh. 2 weeks later, I drove to Virginia. I didn't call first. I had written back briefly saying I was open to meeting if he was still willing. He responded within a day, politely and without pressure. He suggested a cafe just off the highway, early morning, quiet hours. It wasn't a big event. That's how I knew it was real. When I arrived, he was already sitting outside with a black coffee, dressed in a simple collared shirt sleeves, rolled to the elbow. He stood when he saw me. No fanfare. Just a man who had carried something for a long time and needed to lay it down. Miss Easton, he asked. I nodded. Claire. He shook my hand firm, but not performative, then gestured to the seat across from him. We sat, and for a moment neither of us said anything. Then he spoke. I had rehearsed something, but it feels stupid now. I gave him a gentle smile. So don't rehearse, just talk. He exhaled. When we got lifted, I had this image in my head, this idea that someone out there had done something impossible for us. I thought maybe it was strings being pulled, family connections, luck. But it wasn't. It was you. Just doing your job. I almost didn't sign, I said quietly. It took hours. I had to override 2 other approvals. I had no reason to put my name on it except I couldn't not. He nodded slowly. We never know how close we come, do we, to being forgotten or saved. His voice carried no bitterness, only reverence. He reached into his jacket pocket and slid something across the table. A photograph, faded, glossy edges bent from years of wallets and hands. A baby in a striped onesie, her eyes crinkled from laughter. That's her, he said. My daughter. Her name's Ava. She just made honor roll last week. I looked down at the image, then back at him. She's beautiful. She's here, he said, because of a woman I didn't know, who sat in a back row at a wedding and didn't ask to be seen. I placed the photo gently back in his hand. Then maybe we both did something right. He smiled. I think Patrick needed people to know. I think that's why he bowed. I think he did it for himself, I said. And maybe that's okay. We didn't linger. We didn't swap contact details or promises to keep in touch. He thanked me once more, then paid for both coffees and walked me to my car. As he opened the door for me, he said something that stayed in my mind the entire drive home. Most heroes I've met talk a lot. You don't. That's how I knew it was real. And then he nodded, turned, and walked away. 15 years ago, I stood under fluorescent lights in a windowless operations room, holding a file no one else wanted to touch. The silence was thick, not peaceful, but procedural. The kind that builds when stakes are high, but paperwork outranks urgency. It was 12:47 a.m., My badge still hung from my neck cold against my collarbone. I hadn't eaten in hours. The coffee was stale, and the air had the stale, sanitized chill of every federal room I had ever worked in. On the satellite feed, a flickering convoy sat suspended in gray-white static, motionless in the center of the frame. 6 men, 1 vehicle torn open from the blast, another barely mobile. The request file had landed on my desk 20 minutes earlier. A medevac clearance request for 1 Lieutenant Colonel Patrick Easton. He wasn't supposed to be there. He had rerouted his team to avoid a suspected IED route saved them from the worst of it, but caught the tail end. Bleeding, unstable. No secure window left. The clearance had already been denied, twice. Not because there wasn't capacity, but because the safe zone deadline had passed by 57 minutes, and no one wanted to be the one to authorize a flight that could be politically indefensible. I was the last signature. 3 overrides were needed. 2 had been secured, but not without hesitation. The 3rd was mine alone, and that meant the fallout would be mine too. I stared at the top page of the file. Clinical language, timestamps. Fuel estimates, no emotion, just numbers stacked like excuses. But something stood out. In the signal path metadata, I noticed a reroute. The request had been forced through a backup channel, one that fed directly into the civilian clearance lane. Patrick had bypassed normal channels, not to cheat, to gamble, on someone like me. I walked to the end of the room, away from the others, and leaned on a steel filing cabinet, holding the paper like it might catch fire. I had worked 14 years to reach GS-15. I was next in line for senior liaison. 1 wrong move, 1 breach of protocol, and that door would close. But I kept thinking about something I'd heard months earlier at a logistics summit. An offhand line from a senior colonel: the quietest deaths are always procedural. I didn't want to be the final no in a list of denials, so I signed it. I turned to the air officer and said, "Clear the corridor, move the bird." He blinked at me. "You serious?" "Yes." He picked up the phone. "We have a go. Execute secondary evac." I didn't stay to watch. I didn't wait for the outcome. I went home, locked the file in my safe, and sat on the edge of my bed staring at the floor like I was waiting for the floor to speak. The fallout came in waves. First came the ethics query, then the internal audit, then the phone call from my supervisor measured cold. There was no reprimand, just reclassification. I was reassigned to a lower profile role. Fewer decisions, less risk. No one said I was wrong, but the message was clear. Don't be that brave again. For years, I didn't speak about it. I told myself it was just one decision among many, that it wasn't personal, that I had just done the job. But even then I knew better. That night didn't haunt me, it shaped me. It taught me that some systems are designed to reward obedience, not courage. That some lives are only saved when someone decides not to wait for permission. And yet no one ever asked what I had signed. No one ever mentioned Easton again, not until the wedding, not until the bow, not until the coin. That memory had lived inside me, tucked between silence and service, like a pressed leaf no one thought to frame. And now, after years of pretending it was just one choice, I let myself remember it fully. I opened the safe that night, took out the hard copy. My original notes were still there, highlighted margins, timecode annotations, the section where I overrode risk level 3 with manual authority. And for the first time in 15 years, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. We all get asked to sign things in this life: papers, contracts, silences. Most of us sign what we're told. That night, I signed what I believed. 5 men got to hold their children because of it. The world didn't clap. The agency didn't write a memo. But that bow, that coin, that letter, they whispered something I hadn't let myself believe in a long time. It mattered. The envelope was ivory, heavy, embossed. I knew exactly who it was from before I opened it. It arrived on a Monday, tucked neatly between a nonprofit newsletter and a utility bill. My name was written in gold script, underlined once, a detail I found oddly performative. Inside, a folded card with pale pink borders and a gold wax seal. The kind of stationery used for thank you notes and social invitations, not for olive branches. Claire, I wanted to reach out personally and extend my gratitude for your presence at the wedding. It was an unforgettable evening. I also wanted to apologize if any of our guests or family caused discomfort. That was certainly never the intention. I've spoken with my daughter, and we both agree it would be lovely to see you again soon. We're hosting a post-wedding dinner next weekend for close family and friends. A quieter evening, more intimate. We'd be honored to have you attend. Warmly, Charlotte Linwood. There was no mention of the speech, no mention of the bow, just a polite deflection wrapped in formality. I read it twice, and still it said nothing. Not really. Charlotte Linwood, mother of the bride. A woman who had once given a toast about legacy and standing with those who reflect our family's values. I remembered her clear as glass, perched at the head table in her champagne-colored dress. Lips pursed as if holding the air hostage. That night she hadn't looked at me once, not after the toast, not after Patrick's bow, not even after the final applause. Now, days later, she was inviting me back. Not because she wanted me there, but because I had become inconvenient to ignore. I didn't RSVP. 2 days later, I received a phone call. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me was curious. Hello, Claire Easton. Yes, this is Charlotte Linwood. I hope you don't mind me calling. Her voice was soft but practiced. The way someone speaks when they've spent a lifetime negotiating real estate and reputations. I received your card, I said. Wonderful. I wasn't sure it would reach you. I thought it might be better to call directly. She paused. We'd really love to have you join us this weekend. It's just close family and some select guests. More personal, no microphones. There it was, the subtle dig. No microphones. No surprise toasts. Just a room she could control. I appreciate the invitation, I said calmly, but I think I'll decline. A longer pause this time. Then I understand you may feel uncomfortable after the wedding. That wasn't our intention. Some guests, well, people sometimes say things they don't mean. Do you mean the people who called me a nanny? Or the ones who laughed at my dress? She hesitated. Yes, exactly. That kind of thing. It was unkind. It was revealing, I said. Not unkind. Silence. Then her voice returned lower now. Claire, I'll speak plainly. What happened at the wedding, it surprised a lot of people. It left questions. It changed the mood. My daughter felt blindsided. I didn't speak. You didn't have to. I let that settle between us. Charlotte continued carefully. We've built a family name that values privacy and order. What your presence represented, well, it caught us off guard. But we're prepared to include you now. We'd like to recognize your contributions, make space for you, properly. I could hear it then, not apology, but damage control. She wasn't trying to welcome me. She was trying to manage me. Charlotte, I said softly, I was never asking to be included. I came because I was invited. I sat quietly, and I left quietly. Yes, but, and yet somehow I continued, that was too loud for your comfort. A pause sharp and clean. I don't need to be acknowledged by people who didn't see me until someone else forced their eyes open. She exhaled. You're making this very difficult. No, I said, I'm making it very clear. There was a beat of silence long enough for her to either speak from honesty or retreat into etiquette. She chose the latter. Well, she said, we'll leave the invitation open. I think it's better if you close it. Then I ended the call. Underscore 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 underscore. That evening, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the wind move through the oak trees across the street. I thought about how many times women like Charlotte had tried to fix discomfort with dinner invitations, as if a fresh menu could erase old hierarchies, as if extending a chair meant they respected the person in it. But I didn't need their table. I had my own. The next morning, I mailed her card back unstamped, unsealed, with a note inside that said, "Some things aren't meant to be salvaged. Thank you for showing me that, and nothing more." The email was brief, no subject line, in all caps. No formal header, just quiet language and deep sincerity. The kind that doesn't chase attention, it trusts the reader to feel the weight. Miss Easton, my name is Sarah Whitman, Director of Programming for the Southeast Veterans Honor Network. We heard about what happened at the Linwood wedding. One of our board members, David Kern, shared your name with us. He also shared your impact. We'd like to invite you to speak at our Spring Remembrance Gathering in Atlanta next month. The theme is Unsung Acts. We don't expect a speech about heroism, just a voice from someone who knows what it means to act when no one else will. Please let us know if you'd consider it. With deep respect, Sarah, I read the message 3 times. My fingers hovered over the reply for several minutes. And then slowly, I closed the laptop. I didn't say yes, but I didn't delete it either. Over the next 2 weeks, I let the idea settle like fog into a valley. I wasn't afraid of public speaking. I'd done it in my early years project briefings, oversight panels, grant hearings. What gave me pause wasn't the stage. It was the weight of being seen in a way I had spent most of my career trying to avoid. For 15 years, my role had been to make difficult things happen quietly. I wasn't the face in the photos. I was the name in the bottom right-hand corner of the decision form. But something about that wedding, the bow, the letter, the phone call from David, had shifted the way I moved through my own history. Maybe the time had come not to step forward, but to pass the microphone the way someone once passed the weight to me. So I wrote back, "Dear Sarah, thank you for the invitation. I accept, but on one condition. I would like to bring someone else with me, someone who has spent a decade advocating for civilian evac clearance reform, someone who reminds me of who I used to be, only braver. Her name is Lila Nguyen. If you allow it, I'd like her to speak in my place. I'll be there, but I want her voice to carry the message. Let me know if this is possible. With gratitude, Claire Easton." They said yes. __________________________________________________________________________________________________________________ The memorial hall in Atlanta was understated, all brushed steel and warm wood with rows of folding chairs and a banner above the stage that read, "Honor without headlines." I arrived early, seated in the second row, dressed in dark blue, with my hair pulled back. No name tag, no fanfare, no announcement. That's how I wanted it. Lila stood beside the podium, going over her notes one last time. She was in her early 30s, small frame, deliberate voice eyes that scanned the room without flinching. She had been on my clearance team for 2 years, a specialist in logistical exceptions. I had mentored her quietly, and she had risen faster than most. I had always believed she would go further than I had, not because she played louder, but because she questioned the system earlier. When the program began, the room hushed. The first few speakers honored names etched into stone: mothers, medics, translators. One man recited the name of a friend who had radioed for help 3 times, and whose voice never came through the 4th. Then Sarah took the stage. Before we closed, she said, "We have one final speaker. She's here not to talk about herself, but about what happens when one person says yes in a room full of silence." She gestured toward Lila, and the room exhaled. Lila stepped forward. Her hands did not shake. Her voice was low but clear. "I am not here because I saved lives. I am here because I watched someone else do it and refused credit for years." Claire Easton is sitting in the second row. Some of you may know her name. Most of you won't. That's exactly how she designed it. But 15 years ago, she signed a form that brought 5 men home against orders, against policy, and against the recommendation of her superiors. One of those men now serves on your board. Another sent her a thank you letter with his daughter's picture in it. She never asked for applause. But I am here to say we are building a better system today because of what she did in the dark. So while I have the mic, I'd like to borrow her lesson. The people who make the loudest noise are rarely the ones who shift history. But the quiet ones, the women who sign their name and then step back, they change everything. I looked down as the applause began. Not because I was embarrassed, but because I didn't want to cry. __________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________ After the event, Lila found me by the side door. "You okay?" she asked. I smiled. Better than I expected. She handed me something, a pin small in bronze. It read, "Civilian Valor." "They gave it to me to give to you," she said. "I told them you wouldn't wear it, but you should still have it." I held it in my palm. "Put it in the box," I said, and I meant it. The call came on a Sunday afternoon. I had just returned from the market, arms full of late spring pears and rosemary crackers I probably didn't need. My phone buzzed as I set the bags down on the kitchen counter. Unknown number, Virginia area code. I almost let it ring out. But something in me, something quiet and curious, made me answer. Hello? There was a pause, then a soft, nervous voice. Is this Claire Easton? Yes, speaking. Another pause, deeper this time. I could hear the caller exhale. My name's Leah Martinez. I'm a junior at Georgetown. I don't expect you to know me. I got your number through Lila Nguyen. She said it was okay to reach out. I leaned against the counter. Go on, I saw the wedding video, she said. Well, a clip of the groom's uncle bowing to you. It was on social media. Someone posted it, not the family. It went quiet viral, if that makes sense. Not millions of views, but the kind that spreads between people who get it. I blinked. I didn't realize it was recorded. Neither did I, but it found me anyway. She was quiet again, as if bracing for judgment. I guess I wanted to tell you what it meant to me, seeing that. Seeing you. I said nothing, giving her space. I'm studying international relations. I want to work in foreign conflict policy, maybe post-conflict rebuilding. But lately I felt like I'm drowning. I'm always the quiet one in the room, the girl who doesn't interrupt, who's always told she needs to speak up more if she wants to lead. It's like no one sees the work I'm doing. They just see how little I talk about it. I let her words settle. I knew that feeling too well. The quiet weight of being overlooked in favor of those who performed louder. And then I saw that man. She continued to stop a wedding toast to bow to you. And you didn't even flinch. You didn't milk it. You didn't wave. You just sat there. And somehow, I knew. I knew you weren't there for the credit. But the credit came anyway. And it hit me so hard I started crying. My throat tightened. I walked slowly toward the window, watching the sunlight stretch across the porch railing. Leah, I said softly, you're not wrong. Quiet people don't get noticed first, or second. Sometimes not at all. She didn't interrupt. But the thing they never teach you is this: what lasts is never loud. She breathed out again. That's what I needed to hear. I could tell she hadn't expected me to pick up. She wasn't calling to network. She wasn't asking for a job. She was just reaching out because something in her had shifted and needed to find out if it was real. I don't want to take up your time, she said quickly. I just thank you for existing, for being who you are. I'm glad the moment reached you, I said. It did more than that, she replied. It made me feel like maybe I don't have to change to belong. Maybe I just need to stay long enough for the room to catch up. There it was, that quiet truth I hadn't had the words for at her age. You don't need to change, I said. You just need to build the room differently when it's your turn. I heard her voice hitch slightly. I wrote that down just now. I hope you live it. She laughed softly. May I call you again sometime? No pressure. I think I might need someone like you in my life. I smiled. I think you already have someone like you. You're just becoming her. She thanked me once more, and we hung up. Underscore, 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 underscore. That evening, I pulled out an old notebook from my desk drawer, the one I used in my 20s during late nights at the agency when I had nowhere to place my doubts. I flipped to a blank page and wrote just one sentence. The day I stopped asking for the mic was the day my voice finally arrived. Then I closed the notebook and let it sit. The next day I wrote to Lila and asked her to connect Leah with a few people in the field. Quiet leaders, women who had walked the long, unspoken path. I didn't offer mentorship. I offered mirrors so she could see herself reflected 100 different ways. Underscore, 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 underscore. A week later, I received a small card in the mail. No envelope, no signature. Thank you for proving that legacy can begin in silence. Someone learning how to walk forward with both eyes open. It was typed, not handwritten. I placed it in the same box that held the coin, then closed the lid with both hands. It didn't feel like closure. It felt like beginning. I drove there alone. No invitation, no timeline, no reason that made sense on paper. It had been 6 months since the wedding. Summer had bowed out quietly, leaving behind September skies and crisp-edged leaves that whispered their change. The vineyard was quieter now, its rows no longer lined with lanterns or laughter. No florals, no tablecloths, no speeches. Just sunlight slanting across the hills and the faint hum of bees working what was left of the season. I parked beneath the eucalyptus tree where the valet tent used to be. The bark still peeled in soft strips, and the air still carried that clean citrus scent. I stepped out, heels crunching gently against the gravel, and walked without urgency across the curved path toward the reception patio. No one knew I was here, not even me, until I was halfway down the highway. But after a string of letters, a voicemail from Lila, and a final message from Leah, 6 words that simply read, "I didn't shrink," I got it. I understood what had pulled me back. The patio was bare, just stone under sun. The long tables were gone, the flowers packed away. What remained was a single wooden bench near the far edge facing west. I sat. No ceremony, no spotlight. Just me and the long view of grapevines folding into gold. And for the first time, I understood something I hadn't at the wedding. It had never been about vindication, not about proving anyone wrong, not even about being seen. It was about remembering what I never lost. No one from the Linwood family had reached out. No second invitation, no apology card, not even a polite follow-up. But absence has its own kind of clarity. When people show you where they'll never stand you, stop leaving space for them. A bird landed a few feet away, small, brown, ordinary. It pecked at something invisible, then flew off again. I watched it without moving. Stillness, I've learned, has a language most people never bother to learn. I stayed for 23 minutes, not by design. But that was the length of time I had once sat by the kitchen doors at the wedding counting trays of shrimp cocktail, while people laughed toward the dance floor. Back then I had been positioned in the margins. Now I was exactly where I chose to be. Before I left, I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded napkin I'd kept from that morning's cafe. On it I had written something, just one line. A reminder for myself, but maybe also for whoever might sit here next. The table doesn't make the woman, but the woman remembers who she was when they tried to seat her in the back. I tucked it beneath a smooth stone and stood. No one watched me leave. No one needed to. I drove home in silence, windows down, air cool against my cheek. That night I slept without dreams, or if I dreamed, I don't remember. What I do remember is waking up different, not triumphant. Not finished, just settled. It didn't feel like an ending. It felt like something else entirely. This story left an ache and a calm all at once. Claire is one of the richest characters you've written, a symbol of quiet legacy and integrity. Her revenge isn't loud. It's recognition delayed but earned. This is not just a viral story. It's a lasting one. If you saw yourself in this story, hit subscribe to keep hearing kindness echo after heartbreak.